Do you know who I'm disappointed in? NC State. I could have gone with Virginia Tech here, quite frankly. By the way, quick side note, UCLA fans, I tried to tell you, and you could be fine in the long run, but tried to tell you this was going to be a bad year. This could be a really bad year. Just had to slip that in. But NC State, that was not a great performance. NC State is 2-1. They're the most disappointing 2-1 college football team in the entire country. And the reason I have them as more disappointing than Virginia Tech losing to Vanderbilt, who had an honorable mention biggest letdown performance of the weekend, losing on the road to Georgia State as a double-digit favorite. They could have won their third game. They could have been 3-0 going into next week, and yet they are not. Anyway, NC State is a team that I had dark horse ACC title aspirations for. NC State's a team with their schedule that I felt could have won 10 games. They still could, but they can only lose one more, of course. And I don't know how much faith I have in them to do that. They have a... I laughed before this next sentence. You're about to see why. They play back to... The AP poll works in mysterious ways. More on them later. They play back-to-back top 25 opponents. I can barely get the sentence out of my mouth. Clemson and Northern Illinois. It's too good to not be true, and it's 100% true. 21st ranked Clemson, 23rd ranked Northern Illinois. What a sentence. That's what NC State has upcoming. They're at Clemson. They're at home against the Huskies. Then they play Syracuse, at Cal, host Stanford, host Duke, at Georgia Tech, at North Carolina. It's not a brutal schedule. It's incredibly workable. I thought they could win double-digit regular season games. My faith in their ability to do that is pretty slim. It's pretty slim. Syracuse is a good team. Cal is a solid team. Georgia Tech's a pretty good team. I don't think they're going to win all of those games. Through the first three matchups, NC State has delivered 3 underwhelming or outright disappointing performances. West Carolina the first week, it was a dogfight. That's not good. 38-21 the final. Week 2, the big marquee game in your home state, not your home stadium, but in your home state against Tennessee, 51-10. And then this past week, you come back home, you play Louisiana Tech, who's a fine program. Fine team, maybe. Can't say I know a lot about Louisiana Tech. 30-20. This is not a team that looks like they're contending for the ACC. Now, they can flip this narrative. They can change my perception and the perception of many others, and maybe the belief in that locker room this week if they go on the road and win at Clemson. I've been far more impressed with Clemson through the first 3 games than I have NC State. So they're one of the most disappointing teams, and they had another disappointing outing this past week. You should win that game by more than 10 at home. You just should. You just should. And I have been let down so far by the Wolfpack. I hope they get back into my good graces, because I think Dave Doran is a really good coach, and I think they had a really good offseason. But the quarterback revolving door, that hasn't been great. That has not been great. And the team overall, it hasn't been there. It hasn't been there yet. Maybe they figure it out this week against Clemson. So that was disappointment number 1. Disappointment number 2, Georgia. What happened to Georgia? They won the football game, technically. They got what actually mattered, what everybody will remember. This is not the first time Georgia has been pushed during this undefeated run in the regular season. This is not the first time they've been pushed by Kentucky in the undefeated regular season. If you're a head football coach and you have Georgia on your schedule this year, how do you not call Mark Stoops and say, excuse me, Coach Stoops, what are you doing that's working? Why does this work? Why does this click? Why can most teams even teams that have more talent than Kentucky? Ole Miss's team last year, more talented than Kentucky. They didn't play Georgia this close. Why does Kentucky have the blueprint? I don't know. I don't even know if Mark Stoops would answer that hypothetical phone call. He probably wouldn't. But Georgia, 13-12. Yikes. The Wildcats almost saved their season here. And here's why this doesn't make sense, and why college football is indeed best played on the field rather than on paper. Because someone like me can come on here and make an assessment about what a game should be, what it might look like, or what I think it will look like. Because last week, Kentucky at home gets blasted into oblivion by South Carolina, who we saw this week, and I talked about it on the reaction show. I think they're a pretty good team. I don't think it's a fluke. I think South Carolina has played well in back-to-back weeks, once at home and once on the road. Both games, conference opponents. That's a really encouraging thing if you're a fan of the Gamecocks and if you're a Shane Beamer specifically. But for Georgia to go in and not even come close to having the same sort of day as South Carolina, a team that I bet if you put up on a neutral field, Vegas would favor the Bulldogs by somewhere pushing 20 points. I don't know how to explain any of that. Kentucky almost won the game outright, but Georgia survives, and they still just don't lose in the regular season. They might at some point this year. If you play like that against Texas, you might wind up having a loss in the regular season. Georgia's schedule is really tough. I still think Georgia's a really good team. And for those of you that are worried about the Bulldogs, I refer you to one of my previous comments on Georgia right here on this very show, just in case you forgot. Georgia has had these struggles before. They went to Missouri and struggled. They've been to Kentucky and struggled. And they're still a great football team. They had a bad week. And it's a perfect testament to how hard it is to go undefeated in the SEC. That is an incredibly difficult thing to do because even the best teams, the best programs, there's nobody that wins by 30 points every single week. It doesn't happen. You're going to have letdown performances, and the great teams, they're able to find a way through it. Georgia has found their way through these sorts of missteps before. I believe they will again, and they'd still be my number one team. I understand why Texas is number one in the AP poll. They've had the more impressive start to the season than Georgia has. Okay, that's fine. I'm still picking Georgia to win the national championship. I'm not wavering off of that selection just because they had one bad game. If they string together 3 or 4 bad games, I might change my mind, but I'm not doing that right now. I am not, absolutely not, giving up on Georgia. Last disappointing performance here, Kansas. Oh, Kansas. What has happened to you, Kansas? Losses to Illinois and then to UNLV? Look, the Rebels are clearly a Mountain West contender. They are obviously a G5 playoff contender this year. Barry Odom and company are not going to be in Las Vegas for long if this keeps up. We were talking about Billy Napier earlier in this show. If Lane Kiffin were to get hired there and somebody else gets hired to Ole Miss and the coaching carousel starts to go round and round and round and round and round, yeah, you're going to hear Barry Odom's name come up because he is winning at a place that hasn't seen winning in a very long time. UNLV has played 2 Power 4 teams out of the Big 12, Houston and Kansas. And guess what? They're 3-0 for the first time since 1984. But Kansas, a team that still can make the Big 12 championship game. I refer you to Utah 2021. They started the season 1-2. They lost 1 conference game. They made the Pac-12 championship game. They ran Oregon off the field. Kansas could still do that. But boy, my faith in them has come down considerably. To lose that football game, kicking it all around the field, literally, Will Ferrell style, kicking and screaming, that was not a good look for the Kansas Jayhawks. They couldn't stop UNLV. Jalen Daniels doesn't look like himself. Maybe I underestimated the loss of Annie Kotelnicki. Their offense coordinator went over to Penn State. Maybe I overlooked that. I knew it happened, but I thought with the same head coach and with a veteran quarterback, they'd be okay. They don't look okay. And losing to Illinois on the road, that's one thing. The Illini, deservedly so, ranked to the top 25, they're 3-0. But to lose to UNLV the following week, that's a big disappointment for Kansas. Your only path to the playoff now, and probably always was, but now it's confirmed, is winning the Big 12 Conference. And boy, that seems like a dicey proposition if they don't start playing better football. Here's the good news for Kansas, though. The Jayhawks don't have a Big 12 loss yet. They are undefeated, just like everybody except for TCU. I'm going to talk about that more on tomorrow's show. But Kansas, boy, that was a letdown performance against the Rebels.